This video is going to be on solving equations with fractions. So there are going to be times when you are presented with an equation, like down here. We have 2/3 x plus 3 minus x over 2 is equal to 5. So we have an equation with the equal sign, expression, equation, but we have those pesky looking fractions. So what we're going to want to do is to solve, we're going to want to get rid of those fractions. So how do we get rid of those fractions? So to undo a fraction coefficient, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply by what's called the lowest common denominator. So lowest common denominator, or LCD. And what that is essentially, so coming down here, it's asking what is the lowest common denominator for the following sets of fractions. So lowest common denominator essentially is finding the smallest number or multiple that a set of numbers share. So for example, let's come to these fractions. We have a set of three fractions here, and we want to find the lowest common denominator, or LCD. So we're going to find what's called the lowest common multiple of the denominators. So lowest common multiple is a multiple that each one of these, the smallest multiple that each one of these numbers share. So the way we're going to do that is we have 2, 3, and 3. So I'm just going to write out over here 2 and 3. And to get started, I'm just going to write out in numbers of 2. So I'm going to count out in 2. So we got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on. And 3, we'll have 3, 6, 9, 12, and so on. So now we need to find the smallest number that each one of these rows share, each one of these sets share. So 3, mark off 3, or 2, sorry, we're going to mark off 2, mark off 3, I'm sure 4. Looks like they share 6. So 6 is the smallest number that both of these multiples share. So that means we're going to multiply the 6 by all the expressions, but we'll get into that. So let's go ahead and just get comfortable in finding the lowest common multiple or the lowest common denominator. All right, so we have 5, 2, and 10. So I'm just going to write those out, 5, 2, 10. Go ahead and box in that answer because they want to know the lowest common denominator. All right, so I'm going to count. Remember, we're just looking at the denominator, so I'm going to count in multiples of 5. So 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on. And then 10, 20, 30, 40, and so on. All right, so we're going to find the smallest number that each one of these sets share. All right, so we need to get rid of anything less than 10 because 10 is the largest number. And it looks like 10 is actually the smallest number that each one of them share. So 10 is going to be the lowest common denominator. All right, and then over here we have 4, 2, and 6. So I'm going to count in multiples of 4, 4, 8, 12, 16, and so on. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on. And then 6, 12, 18, 24, and so on. All right, so now we're going to find the smallest number that these sets share. All right, so we have a 4, 4, but it can't be anything smaller than 6, and 6 is the largest number. All right, 8 can't be 8. 12. Oh, it looks like it's going to be 12. So 12, I'm going to have to go one more. Dot, dot, dot. So 12 is actually the smallest number that each one share. So 12 will be the lowest common denominator. All right, so what happens when we multiply each of these fractions by the lowest common denominator? Okay, so 2, 3, and 3 we said is 6. So if we multiply each one by 6, and remember another way to write a whole number is to put a 1 under it. So that's equal to 3. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and then 3 times 1 is 3. 6 divided by 3, 6 divided by 3 is 2, and then 2 times 5 is 10. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 2 times 1 is 2. Let's see. So you can either type these in on the calculator, or what I'm doing is so we have 10, 10, and 10 over 1 over 1 over 1. Or what I'm doing is I'm taking this numerator of the number that we got. You can either type in 10 times 2 divided by 5 and set up your fraction, or 10 divided by 5 is 2, and then 2 times the numerator, which is 4. This one comes out to 15. So we put 10, and then 12. What's the lowest common denominator? So that comes out to 9, that comes out to 6, and that one comes out to 2. All right, so it's asking what happens when we multiply each of those fractions by the lowest common denominator. Well, what happens is that we get a different set of numbers. So that means it's very possible that we're going to get, if we have a fraction with two set of denominators, we are going to get different sets of numbers. So let's go ahead and put that into action. So it says, now let's try it, solve the equation. All right, so I just want to point out, I like this, I've made this one right here, this step. So remember your steps, dumpsters contain very nasty stuff. So whenever we have fractions, so whenever fractions are present, we do what's called the lowest common denominator, and we said the lowest common denominator is finding the lowest common multiple, or LCM, of all denominators, which is what we did in these examples right here. In these fractions, we found the lowest common denominator, lowest common multiples of the denominator. And then what we do is we multiply that LCM by each term, what's given to us. So remember, this is a term, this is a term, this is a term, and this is a term. We're going to multiply that on both sides of the equation. All right, so let's see what that looks like. So basically, so now whenever we look at a equation with fractions, now what we need to do is we essentially have another step at the very beginning. So to find the lowest common denominator, we're going to create parentheses so that way we can multiply what we have to do, multiply, and then we're going to distribute so that way we can get rid of those parentheses. So here's what that looks like. All right, so we have a fraction, so now we need to find the LCD, lowest common denominator, of those of the fractions, which is the denominators. We're just looking at the denominators. So we have a 3 and we have a 2. So I'm going to write 3 and 2 down over here, or maybe right here. I'm going to write in multiples of each number. So 3, count multiples of 3. So we got 3, 6, 9, and so on. 2, and for 2, we have 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on. All right, so the smallest number that they share, cross out the 3. So it looks like it's 6. So 6 is our lowest common multiple or lowest common denominator. All right, so what we're going to do is, so it tells us here, so we found the lowest common multiple. Great. So now it says to multiply that lowest common multiple by each term on both sides of the equation. So I'm going to have to create parentheses on both sides of the equation. Oops, move that up. So I wrote these parentheses in. So what was our lowest common denominator? It was 6. So that means I'm going to multiply 6 on this side and 6 on this side. All right, so there's two options to doing this. You can type in the calculator 6 times. Remember, when we have a parentheses, we multiply. So 6 times, and then control division, 2 divided by 3, and then get your new answer. That's an option. Essentially what you're doing is you are distributing to each term just like we normally do. However, that might be kind of hard once we get to this one. So another way to do it is to divide the lowest common multiple. You can write it over here, lowest common multiple, divided by the denominator, and then multiply it by the numerator to get the new number for your term. Here's what I mean. So the lowest common multiple, which we said is 6, that's where we're multiplying on both sides. We're going to divide that by the denominator that's given to us. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. So I'm going to just write that 2 handy. So 3 goes into 6 2 times. And then we're going to multiply that number, which is 2, times the numerator, n. So this 2 times the n. And get 4, because 2 times 2 is 4. So I'm going to rewrite that as 4, but it's a variable, so I'm going to carry that x with it. All right, we have a number on its own, so same thing, or not same thing, I'm sorry. So it's just going to be 6 times positive 3, which is positive 18. All right, so 6 divided by 2. 2 goes into 6 3 times, and then 3 times the numerator, which is 1x, so it would just be 3x, or minus 3x, since there's a negative there, equals to, all right, so now we're just looking at this side of the expression, so which is just a 5, so 5 times 6 is 30. There we go. So now we got rid of the parentheses, we got rid of the fractions, and we got rid of the parentheses that we created. So now we can treat this equation just like any other equation we've been doing. So now we can move on to combine like terms. So we got 4x here and a negative 3x. So 4 minus 3 is 1, or just 1x. Bring down your 18, plus 18, and then equals to 30. 30 stays the same. All right, and then from here, we're going to move the number, minus 18, minus 18. Notice I skipped the variable because the variable is already on one side, so now I just need to move the number to one side. That cancels out. We get x is equal to 30 minus 18, which should be 12. So that's your answer. X is equal to 12. So that's how you get rid of a fraction. Essentially, you are going back a step and finding the lowest common denominator, following these steps here, and then going from there, distributing, getting rid of those parentheses that you created, and then solving like you normally solve. So let's do some more practice problems. All right, so we have a fraction. So we have a 2 and an 8. So I'm going to write down 2 and 8, find the lowest common multiple. So I'm going to write down some multiples of 2. So 2, 4, 6, 8. And we can already tell it's going to be 8. 2 goes into 8 evenly, so that means I can go ahead and mark all this off. 8 is the lowest common multiple. So that means I'm going to multiply 8 by both expressions, meaning that I'm multiplying 8 by all the terms on both sides of the equation. So now we have, remember what I said, so 8 divided by 2, which is 4, and then 4 times the numerator. I'm going to multiply that 4 times the numerator and get 4. So 4 times 1 is 4. I'm going to rewrite it down here. So we get 4, but it's a variable, so we're going to carry down that x. Or you can type in on the calculator, 4 times 1 divided by 2, which is a half, and we know what a half of 8 is. A half of 8 is 4. So either way, it could work for you. All right, so we multiplied 8 by this term. Now we're going to have to multiply 8 by this term. So 8 times 3, which is 24. So plus 24 is equal to 8. 8 goes into 8 one time, or 8 divided by 8 is 1. And then 1 times the numerator, which is 5. So we're going to rewrite this as 5, carry down our variable. So now we're going to multiply 8 by this term. So 8 times negative 1, which is negative 8. And then we just solve like we normally do. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 4x. That cancels out. I'm going to carry down the 24. 5 minus 4 is 1x. Carry down the negative 8. So now I'm going to add 8 on both sides. Carry down the x. So x is already by itself. So 24 plus 8 is 32. So you should get x is equal to 32. All right, so let's go over here to this one. So we got 1/2 x minus 16 is equal to negative 28 minus 1/4 x. All right, so you should know the drill by now. I want to find the lowest common multiple of 2 and 4. So already, I can already tell, but just in case, I'm going to write it down. So that way you guys get into the routine. So 2, 4, 6, 8, so on. 4, 8, 12, so on, we can already see that it's going to be 4. 4 is the smallest number that each of these multiples share. So that means we're going to multiply 4 by both sides. And then so we created parentheses, so now we're going to distribute. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And then 2 times the numerator, which is 1. So 2 times 1 is 2. So 2x, got a negative. 4 times negative 16, I already have my negative, so 4 times 16 is 64. Equals, so negative 28 times 4, we should get negative 112. So we multiplied it by this term. Now we're going to multiply it by this term. So again, you can type in on the calculator 4 times, set up your fraction, 1 divided by negative 4, decimal, enter, and you should get your answer. Or you can do it by hand. 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 1 times the numerator is 1, so it's just 1x or minus x. So this should be 2x minus 64 equals negative 112 minus x. Great, and then we just solve from there. So let's move the x's to one side, inverse operation. I'm going to go ahead and combine 2 steps into one row, so that way I save space. So let's see, we're going to have an x on this side, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel out the number on this side, so plus 64, plus 64. Again, I'm doing the exact same thing, I'm just writing both steps in one row. So that's going to cancel out, and that's going to cancel out. So I'm going to rewrite this, so 2 plus 1x, 2x plus 1x is 3x, is equal to negative 112 plus 64. You should get negative 48. And then we want to get this x equal to 1 by itself, so we're going to multiply it by itself, the coefficient, divide by 3, divide by 3. X is going to be equal to negative 48 divided by positive 3, which you should get negative 16. All right, there's that one. So let's move on to this one. Oh, this one's easy for us. Great. We have a 5 and a 5. So the lowest common multiple has to be, you guessed it, 5. So we're going to multiply 5 on both sides. All right, 5 divided by the denominator. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 1 times 4 is 4x. Or if the number happens to be the same as the lowest common multiple, lowest common denominator, that essentially just cancels out. For this term anyway. So 4x, and then we're going to multiply 5 times the next term, 5 times negative 4, which is negative 20. All right, 5 divided by 5, we're on the next side, so 5 divided by 5 is 1. 1 times the numerator of 2, so 1 times 2 is 2. We're going to rewrite that as 2x. And then 5 times the next term, so 5 times 6 is 30, so positive 30. So we should get 4x minus 20 is equal to 2x plus 30. All right, so now I'm going to do the variable. Okay, so I'm going to do minus 2x, minus 2x. This time, since I have some more space, I'm going to show all the steps for you guys. But if you're comfortable doing it this way, then by all means, go for it. All right, so that's going to cancel out. 4 minus 2 is 2x. Bring down my negative 20. Bring down my positive 30. So remember, we want to get numbers on one side, variable on the other. So I'm going to have to add 20 to cancel out negative 20. So plus 20, that cancels out. Bring down your 2x. 2x is equal to 30 plus 20, which is 50. And then divide by 2, x is going to be equal to 50 divided by 2, which is 25. All right, and that's how you solve equations with fractions. There's essentially another step added. So add it before distributing. So lowest common denominator, you're finding the lowest common denominator, which is the lowest common multiple of all the denominators that are present. You multiply it by that number, and then multiply that number by each term on both sides of the equation. So essentially you're creating parentheses, And then you move on to the next step to distribute those to get rid of the parentheses, and you just carry on from there like any other normal equation.